Hey, Trishak.
Hey, hello.
Do we know if there's a meeting today with
I
Open?
don't know. I can't tell. Let me pull up the channel. I always get confused which Slack to go to. Let's see. No, no
On the
new.
SLSA channel.
Do we have a meeting today? Because I didn't see any agenda there, so
Yeah, I suspect it's because of I think a lot of key people are at OSS Summit.
okay. I didn't even realize this is on it.
Yeah. Oh, maybe not. Hey, Joshua.
Hey,
Trishak and I were just
Hello.
wondering if there's a sync today or if everyone's at Open Source Summit.
I mean, I'm not open source on it. Yeah, good
I wish
question.
I was.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
+1.
Only a few hours away, but it's like $1,000. So I bet most people are there though.
I think we could probably most likely gonna organically cancel in 5 minutes, if I had to guess. Is there anything anyone would like to discuss? I don't know. I could throw something up here where I was helping to review this. So let me pull it up. I think it's a fascinating proposal that everyone should take a look at. It's by, I'm not sure whether I'm saying his name correctly, so I apologize. Vitza, I think, wrote an interesting proposal for using something called a policy. So you know how GitHub Actions now, if you turn on the npm build provenance thing, you can spit out the salsa, the build provenance attestations, right? And it gets recorded in the SIG store and all that good stuff. Great. What Beats is proposing here is that we can write what he calls a policy to be able to enforce things, to be able to say, okay, for these packages with certain versions, I expect them to come from this source code repository precisely, and it needs to be built using this build system specifically. Which is interesting because then you can't change at least these two things, the properties that you expect. It needs to come from this source code repo and build platform. Does this all make sense so far? Oh, hi, Mark. Yeah, let me add that to the agenda. Sorry, it's kind of babbling before looking at the chat. So let me take this and should it be in SIG? I'm gonna put it in PR. All right, there we go.
Would someone else mind leading the meeting today? I have a bunch of background noise right here. So I'll try to be on mute most of the time.
I can't promise that I'll do a great job, but I'll try.
I don't do a great job at it either, so that's fine.
So, okay, with the okay, so let's see. So First thing on the agenda is welcome new members. Is there anyone who'd like to introduce themselves to the group?
I can. Justin, I'm at Google. I've been working in this space outside of SLSA, but in Google open source. Excuse me, Google's own protections for supply chain for a long time with Mark and others. Well, good to be here.
Cool. Welcome. Anyone else?
Is this introductions?
Yes.
My name is Barrick. First time here. I work for Pangea Cyber. We do some security API stuff. I help the security team, do everything, including some AppSec and supply chain security stuff.
Cool. Welcome. So sorry, just so I make sure I got your organization's names right, or maybe you can edit it in the document. That's better.
Yeah, the notes are, I pasted in the chat, but you could also always get to it at salsa.dev/notes. And then the first one is community. And that opens up the meeting notes, and we ask everyone to record attendance.
Cool. So I guess we can move on to the next next thing on our agenda. First thing is the SIG update, special interest group update. First SIG is specification, as you're all probably aware. SLSA V 1.0 was released. No significant updates since then. We had a very nice chat last month from my recollection about where we want to go next. So I encourage all of you to take a look there. But it doesn't look like there's anything on the agenda here that anyone wants to particularly discuss, unless they want to bring it up here.
Now, the spec repo has been fairly quiet. A bunch of folks have requested some clarifications, but there hasn't been a lot of activity on the project otherwise since the release. So yeah, that's about it from the specification side.
Yeah, Mike Lieberman also got a bunch of good feedback from, I think it was KubeCon. And so we still have like the backlog to go through. I think we're just kind of taking a little bit of a breather to catch up on other non-salsa work. But then I think first order business is kind of going through the feedback and addressing that and simultaneously working on the roadmap and figuring out what to do next.
Absolutely. So we encourage everyone here to please take a look at the spec and please send us PRs or issues to help us fix the spec. Positioning, which unfortunately I've not had the time to attend as regularly as I would like. Is there any updates here?
Yeah, I missed the last meeting as well. Last week I was out, and this week looks like that we canceled because in Melbourne most of people was in OpenSSF in Vancouver, right?
Yeah, she is there.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. And that's a perfectly fine update. Next, tooling. I wish Michael Lieberman was here because he usually chairs those SIG working groups. Is anyone aware of updates here?
I think it's the same update, like Michael and well, none of the other folks who are active there that I'm aware of are attending today, and Michael certainly is at Open Source Summit in Vancouver.
That's also fair, and I think to be fair, also a lot of people are trying out the existing tooling as it is. So we will figure things out organically, is my guess. Cool. Let's see. We could go one of two ways here. One is, since many of the steering committee members are here, we could talk about Bruno's excellent work on putting together a draft for formalizing the steering committee election process. Or we could discuss PRs first. Which would you prefer?
Either way works for me.
Okay. I propose we start with the election process just because I think, it's a more important thing to talk about right now. Bruno, would you like to share your updates here?
Let's share my screen. Let's see how I can share. And looks like I don't have the button to share the screen. Oh, okay, yeah, on. They changed. So here's the link for the proposition. I think that I can share the link to wider audience, because I include in here just those people that said they would like to collaborate in this document. So keep it more close to the chest, but of course let's open as soon as we have the structure. But as we have today,
Sorry, do you mind zooming in a little bit, or like making the window smaller? Or I guess yeah, zooming in if you're sharing the whole screen.
yeah, let's see. Get better?
Thanks.
Okay. So the idea is that as we have 7 members, we have election for half of those in every year. So it's 3-4, 3-4, 3-4. That's the idea. And then, of course, we have the candidate expectation. Looks like that Joshua already brought to us that it's that is already definition. So I learned this morning, so I have to update the document to make sure that you have the right reference and not try to replicate information in different documents. But looking for the voting process, first, the idea, again, I run through this process recently with finos.org as well, and we try to do something in that direction that in our case that works well. So I think that it's also can be applied here equally. That it's we open for nomination, we left for like 4 weeks and receive nomination. And nomination will be in the form like the name, it's a form, it's a 1-page document that you feel like what is your name, your title, company. If you would like to include any reference, like for example, LinkedIn or GitHub link, and a nomination statement. It's just a phrase that you describe, for example, what is the qualification, the role in SLSA steering committee member, prior involvement, and the open source or collaborative effort as well, collaboration that you have from the foundation. Try to bring relevant information, but it's 1 paragraph. And as we can assume, for example, we may have, for example, 3 or 4 nominations, but we can have 15. So you're not able to have them to present themselves if you have 15, 20. So the idea is that it's after like 4 weeks, I'm just making this 4 weeks. The steering committee is going to filter those candidates that you think that it's can fit the position, and then you publish what it's the day for the election. And the date of the election will be something like each candidate, they present to everybody what it's your nomination statement, and 5 minutes to present and 5 minutes to answer questions from the steering committee. And then at the end of those presentations, we can deliberate to try to find what is the best fit, and we have a formal vote. And then after that, we can decide who's going to take the position. However, one challenge that was anticipating since the beginning, and it happened as well with the other for example, finos.org, it was when you have, for example, steering committee members like we have today, and you have 2 years of duty, if you want to say, how are you starting breaking down? So in that case, we created this transitional election. So we increased the number of members for 1 year, so that the original 7, they go to the election the following year. So for example, here I was thinking about 4 can be 3 as well. For example, we have 7 from 2023, we can add like 3 or 4 members. And then in 2024, all the original 7 members have to go to election. So from the 7, only 3 or 4 you be elected and continue with the 2-year cycle. That's a way that it's, because for now it's going to say, well, unless we have enough people that it's going to say, well, I don't want it to serve and the steering committee member, how are you going to select? How are you going to appoint? So this is an easier transition and everybody go to the same process. That's one proposition. And I pause for comments. We can debate about numbers, if it's 4, 3, 5, I don't know.
Well, one, our governance doc says that we have up to 7 members, so I think we need to change the governance doc to say that. I didn't understand the justification for adding more. Is it because we don't want to pick which 4 are up for election this year?
Well, that's one way to solve the problem. For example, we have 7 now. Who, unless we have enough people in the steering committee saying, okay, I release my seat, so go to the election, how you're going to select yourselves? So if you decided to add, for example, 3 more or 4 more, and you temporarily for 1 year, we have more members, everybody that was that it's in the original 7 will go to the election next year. So our 7, you go from 7 to 3 or 4 next year, but you'll be through an election process. It's just to make it fair. That it's only once, that's transition election, that is the point. It's not going to stay like 10 on 11 moving forward. You'll be 7, but from 2023, 2024, we have more.
Yeah, so what's in the doc, what's in our governance doc, which I could paste a link in the Zoom.
Yeah, I know.
Well, I guess says that we are supposed to group ourselves into 2 groups, one serving initial 2-year term, one searching, the other serving initial 1-year term. I mean, we could change the doc, but I think we need like a vote to change the doc. My inclination would just be to do that. Like we could do it randomly or just agree upon that. That seems easier to me than having like expanding the number and then shrinking down. I don't know if any other thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's slightly harder in the short term, but less work in the long term. The contraction could be difficult, and especially if we have the initial 7 members all want to apply for re-election, like how the voting would work if it's the steering committee that votes for new members would be like you would effectively have the 4 additional members voting on 7 members. Seems kind of screwy.
I guess, Joshua, you also brought up a comment I see now saying like, should we just do, are you proposing basically we just do 1 year, tenure, and just everyone's up for re-election every year?
I think it would be, I mean, 2 years feels like an awful long time. I think it would be better to get to that point. 2-year terms feel long to me.
That was my question also, is that exactly what the 2-year membership means? Is it at most, or is there, yeah, exactly.
I agree.
I don't.
1 year
Sorry.
seems more appropriate, especially given how fast things change and people's jobs change and their commitments to other things change. Like,
And also
Yeah.
does the, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say we should have like some notion of what happens when someone relinquishes their kind of position, or what happens when someone is just not active. Like that, we should document that. I'm not sure if it's captured in the current documentation, but I know in the initial governance docs we had a 2-year term because I think. Yeah, generally, groups like this try to avoid having the entire group be re-elected on an annual basis because you kind of run into issues of like having to figure out everything again from scratch, or having to do some kind of transition period or something.
Yeah.
So sorry, I think Emmy and Zeal have been waiting for a while. Emmy, would you?
Yeah, I'm sorry if I missed it. Was there anything here about like how do you prevent all of the members from being from one specific company?
I think it's already defined in the government document, right?
Is it?
Yeah, I think it is there. I read it.
The current governance doc says the committee will take into account things such as blah, 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 as well as the need to maintain a balanced perspective. For example, no more than 2 people from the same group.
Yeah.
Okay.
That writing is actually a little bit ambiguous. I don't know if the for example is binding or not. That seems like something we should just clarify, and it seems that worthwhile to update the doc. Trishank referenced the in toto steering governance doc as one of the comments. That one is much more explicit. It says, at least 5 members, no more than 2 may be from the same organization, et cetera. That seems.
Yeah, I think because I think it too can lead to kind of lazy membership also of like, hey, we've got all these people from one company and no one, let's not put it in the document because what if no one from other companies is available? But we can always seek out representatives from other companies in order to maintain that diversity on the board. But yes, to your point, I think clarifying that would be important so that it is specific.
Please, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so this is my, in theory, my first meeting to this group, and I'm probably coming at the right time. And the question I had is for the memberships or for getting onto the board or the elections, is it necessary for the candidate to be representing an organization? I ask because, if you look at the tech sector right now, so many people are facing layoffs and, they are in the transition phase. So is this more of an individual and the credibility the individual brings to the table to, to offer to the open source community over here? Or is it more about the individual representing the work that's being done at the organization?
That's a great question. Actually, I'm not sure we thought about it, but I would say I would just add this. I think even if you don't necessarily represent your org, I still think it's worth noting it at least to meet rules such as no more than 2 members are from the same org. That's just my feedback.
Yeah, and I would we also want to have, like to Emmy's point earlier, we want to have a diverse group, and we want to be mindful of things that are going on in the industry. There's there's so many people of high caliber who have been laid off or who are in the process of transitioning jobs, and if we tie them to an organization that is a disservice to the individual who has done the work. So let's be clear about making this as participating in the open source community, contributing to the open source community rather than yes, we are all backed by our organizations. However, there's an individual who drives the work.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point.
Yeah, I guess it's maybe implicit in the governance doc, but the intention was that I believe, electing individuals, not representatives from a company. Like we've had several people like change companies and I think it's tied to the individual. The purpose of the no to companies is just to prevent skew of like, if for example, everyone works at the same company, that like there's an optics perspective, but then also it just doesn't feel balanced. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. I think this is very useful feedback, Bruno, and the rest of the steering committee members. If you think we're ready to share this document more widely, we should.
Yeah. Yeah, if its structure is right, I think that you're good to share widely. I can do that.
Great, thank you. Great. So I think we've wrapped up discussion on that one today. We will wait to get more feedback from the community, finalize it, and go from there. I don't think there's anything else on the agenda other than discussing PRs, and particularly this is for the SLSA proposals repository. We could discuss that for those that are interested. Otherwise, feel free to tune out. This proposal in particular, let me share my screen. I guess it's easier. And feel free to mention other PRs too, right? This is the one that I'm most interested in. Oh, I should also mention that there's an interesting SLSA conformance program. So let me not forget that too, actually. Let me add that here. There we go. Sequential. Very nice. Okay. So I think if I got his name correctly, I may have, forgive me if I'm butchering, but Vitsa, who was previously at Google, I think, has this very nice proposal here, which if I understand the idea correctly, so you might have seen news about how GitHub is producing provenance, right? For you, if you opted in. And so at least for people who opt in, we'll start getting all this very nice attestations about your bills signed using Fulcio and stored in Sigstore, all that good stuff. And I think if I understand correctly, what Vitsa is saying here, great, now we're well positioned to start using what he calls policies to be able to enforce things before you admit things into your production. So for example, you could say, as I was mentioning earlier, you could say things like, for this package in a certain range of version, let's say 1.0.0 and above, it needs to come from this GitHub source code repository, but also be built by GitHub Actions using this particular workflow, let's say, that repo. And so you can start enforcing this and checking signatures on them before you admit these packages. Mark, have I done justice to this PR? Would you like to add more thoughts?
Yeah, so far everything sounds great.
Yeah, so I think Mark had sent a deadline of comments for today, I think, which I think is reasonable because it's been outstanding for a while, and I added some of my thoughts yesterday. I don't know, Mark, how you feel about keeping this open, or should we merge it as a draft and then add more address more substantial feedback and following PRs? What would you propose that we do here?
I think if there's like active, I'm open to this. I feel like if there's active discussion, I'm fine with it, but like I don't want it just kind of sitting around forever. It's currently marked as draft, not as an accepted thing. So I don't have any opposition to submitting it and continuing to iterate. At a high level, I know Trishank, your main feedback was around like using in toto to represent that. I feel like the main, and there's certainly, yes, there's an inconsistency between the language here, like using the term policy, and the language that's in the spec, because they kind of start in the same place and then diverged, because this was kind of being written for a while. And so that would be good to resolve. And one other comment is that I think the purpose of the proposal is not necessarily that this is like canonical documentation, but rather just to kind of get us as a group kind of moving in the same direction. And then once we do that, we could kind of agree on the details. And once it becomes official, it would go into this also. Just as a brief background. The main kind of idea here, I think, is not so much exactly how the thing is encoded. Like, you mentioned in toto. I wouldn't want to require that. I think we should make that like an option. But I think that the main thing is like how is almost like the policy management piece of where do policies get checked, and how do you know what policies to check? Like you said, you know, when you see an npm package foo version 1, how do you? The big question is like, how are you supposed to know what the source repo was supposed to be and how it was supposed to be built? I don't think we want to prescribe and saying like it must be built everything from GitHub Actions, let's say, but rather I think it's more like in practice this thing is built from GitHub Actions, and so that's what a legit build looks like. Like that's what the maintainer is doing today, and so if you then see a subsequent build from something else, that is a significant change, and it should be authorized somehow, basically. Like that's, I think, to me, that's like the high level idea. But it's really difficult to get it into words that everyone agrees on. The other kind of challenging piece is like in this diagram right here that you have presented. Actually, if you could go back to that.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. You know, that there's likely in most cases, and we have this in the spec a bit, 2 places that we'll want to do these kind of admission control or whatever, that at upload time, publication time to a registry,
right?
There's some notion of like, you don't want bad things to get published. And so you need some notion of what good looks like. And we should just, you know, have a recommendation, particularly for open source, about how that could work. In that case, maybe it's not clear to me like what the best route is. Maybe it is that the maintainers of the package say what good looks like, and they just have a check, and then there's some sort of 2-party review or something on changes to that policy. Or maybe it's like it looks like the previous version, and if there's a significant diff, then maybe you have to do some additional check or something. I don't know. But then you also want to you may or may not also want to have a check at like install time. That like regardless of if the policy was checked at upload time, you kind of want to also check at use time. And there, that check might be a little bit different. For example, one way to do that could be in a lock file. Like when you have, let's say you're using npm, you have a package lock.json file that lists the versions, the names, versions, and hashes of everything that your project uses, your dependencies. When your dependencies get updated, you could check the provenance of those and compare the provenance of the new version to the old version of each of your dependencies. And you know, if it looks roughly the same and is like kind of equivalent, then you say good. And if not, then that's a signal that something that you should kind of approve. That is described down in like, I think like the TOFU policies, trust on first use policies, as like an idea for how this could be a way of like low overhead for users and like not much to maintain. But so those are kind of the ideas that we talked about and would like to get feedback on. Basically, my thing is like, I would like to get an implementation of these ideas to try it out and see how well it works in practice. Because that would be better than any sort of design doc, right?
That's fair, I think. And yeah, thanks for the thoughts. Yeah, I agree with you. Probably don't want to overprescribe anything right now while we're trying things out. I do have some questions, as you might have seen, about things like how do you update the policies? Because, you know, if something changes upstream, how do downstream pick it up? But, you know, we can figure that out.
So that's actually where I think the, like if you scroll up a bit to the diagram again, you kind of might have 2 different policies. Like at upload time from the package registry, that's a completely automated process. Like there's no human well, from the package registry's side, there's no human in like npm saying yes or no, right? Like that's a machine. And so then you do have that question of like, how do you know which policies, et cetera, like you described. On the install side policy,
Well, sorry. Just to clarify, you mean like the developers would come in and say, look, NPM, I'm going to use this repositories and build platform in particular. You produce the policy and store it and use it. Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable model. I think that model makes sense, at least to me. And then there's a question of like, well, how do you accept changes to that? Like you
Sure.
said. The box on the right, that's one where I feel like a possibility that I'd like to explore is like a trust on first use thing, where effectively you don't have to get it. Maybe you could seed it from the maintainer, the package maintainer on the left. But once you accept a package, like let's say I start using package foo, and it's in our lock file, and in our project, my team's project, we have foo listed as one of our dependencies. Every time, the first time we take in foo, we have to make some sort of risk determination on whether that's okay. Most people, I think, don't do it. They just click yes, whatever the 4,000 packages that npm update provides, then okay, fine. But ideally, I think there'd be some sort of risk determination of like, is it okay to do that? I think at least in my mind, I don't think there's universal agreement here. In my mind, what I would like to see is when you do updates and you're doing version bumps, that those you could determine those to be low risk, because like it was built in the same way, from the same repository, just a different version. All the parameters were the same. So for like the salsa build track, it looks kind of equivalent. So it's low risk update. In the future, we could have more signals of like the risk. And so if the update is relatively low risk, it's just automatic. And for example, if you're using Dependabot, say, that could be a signal in there. Versus there's a version bump and hey, it's built completely differently. That's, there's a risk that perhaps the package was compromised and it like uploaded something bad, or it has different properties than it used to. So that's kind of what I was thinking. And in that case, it's kind of, there's no explicit policy. It would just be kind of a human making a risk determination of like by comparing old to new. I don't think that's described in this doc, but those are just something I wanted to talk about, like an idea.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's interesting. I'm curious about some details, but I don't think we need to discuss that here. We can discuss that offline. But I'm curious about things like when you say tofu, do you pull like the initial version of the policy from the package registry? But we can discuss that offline. So Mark, I guess to help push. Oh, Aditya has a question, please.
Excuse me. So I only really became aware of this this proposal this morning, so I haven't had a chance to really read it in any level of detail. A lot of what you said, Mark, made sense to me. I do have a question when you say, okay, I also understand that the proposal probably shouldn't be too prescriptive with respect to how policies are specified and verified, and I get all of that. So my question is, this npm specific use case, should it even be a salsa specific proposal at all? Because when we consider that npm themselves, so they're also doing something called publish attestations that isn't part of salsa, for example, you don't want to be doing something very salsa specific for the provenance part of it and something else entirely for any other attestations that are generated along the way. And I guess on a higher level, there's also the question of if, like, do we want a proposal for npm and provenance explicitly when salsa is also moving towards different tracks that come with their own attestations? So we want something a bit more general with like how all of these different attestation types get verified and things like that.
Yeah, I think so. First of all, this is it just is using npm to make it concrete. All these concepts really apply to almost every other ecosystem, like Go, and Go is a kind of Snowflake, but probably would work for Go, but especially PHP and Python and Ruby, although Ruby doesn't have hashes in their log file, but it's not really specific. None of the concepts here are really specific to NPM. And so the idea would be to start with one. It doesn't really matter which ecosystem, just start with something and implement a prototype and kind of get, make some decisions on how it'll work and start to prototype and see, can we get this in a way that we think it'll actually scale to be turned on by default for all users, but in a way that's like seamless and low, low overhead. Like ideally people wouldn't even know it's happening, right? It would just work. And if there's something risky that happens, they'll be notified and say like, oh, there's this bad thing, sort of like an SSH key change, like you get notified for that. But normally the fact that SSH is doing cryptography, you don't even know happening. So I think that's kind of like what I would like to see. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, in part. I'm just like, I think part of the question was also about, well, do we only want to focus on provenance? I know that's the key thing in Salsa at the moment, but do we all how general do we make this, I guess?
Yeah, I feel, anyone feel free to disagree. I mean, that always goes true, but especially now. In my mind, I was thinking that this would be scoped to things that are in Salsa, like the scope to mitigating the threats that are defined by Salsa. So right now we have a build track that's about tampering in the build system, and this would be checking those things. In the future, we have source track that maybe talks about tampering of the source code or two-party review or something. It would also check for those type of things as well. Expanding it, but ideally the design would be conducive to expanding to more things that are not defined in Salsa, because I think once you have the hooks there, you naturally can add other features. Yeah, Trisha.
Yeah, if I could propose something, I think this model has worked successfully before for us, that I think we can sort of have it both ways. Here's what I mean. So remember before Salsa 1.0, we were still experimenting with provenance, right? And we had 0.1 of it, 0.2, and so on. I think that's the phase where we are with this. We're experimenting with this. And once we are ready to make it, say, a part of 2.0 thing, then we can, of course, it has to be more generalizable. I would think everyone would want that. So that's one way of going about it. And would that address your concerns, Aditya?
Yeah, I think that does. I was just trying to get a feel for, what if, if and when this proposal is accepted, what that would mean for broader policy spaces and attestations that are not Salsa specific and things like that. From the in total side, I want to note that I've been ignoring, in part, slightly ignoring the in-total enhancement for new layouts, but I should have a bit more time after Friday, well, I guess from Monday. And I want to kind of take this proposal and see how it would fit into what we're proposing there, and if we could have like an in-total specific way of implementing what's proposed here, while also incorporating, and in the NPM context, the publish attestations and things like that. I think that'd be pretty cool to show off in conjunction with this proposal.
Mark, does that work for you and others do, of course?
Yeah, that sounds good. Like my big interest is mostly getting a prototype and trying stuff out. And so the main purpose of this doc in my mind is to get people talking, get people on the same idea, come up with something that we could all work toward, and then start to build it.
That's good. I just want to add one more thing. We're approaching the prototyping phase as well, and I think we'd be using a lot of the stuff that the folks at Testify Sec, like Cole Kennedy and Mikhail, have been working on with Witness, where they've got a policy tool that allows you to specify expected attributes, and it spits out a policy that's kind of looks like an in-total layout, but we're working on bridging all of that. So I think we could maybe also do some prototyping from that angle from our side.
Cool. I think that's a nice way to wrap up this PR. Keeping in mind also that we have 15 minutes left. We want to be mindful of everyone's time. So yeah, so it sounds like I think as long as we document this this sort of like informal agreement that we have here, I think that'll be a good way to make progress with this PR, which we should. Cool. So the next PR, and I don't know if Chris is here, but it's also very interesting, is the problem, again, anyone feel free to correct me here if I'm wrong, but the problem this tries to solve is, okay, so now we've got V1.0. Now we know how to define things like build level tree. But how can I prove this? Because not everything is provable by attestations, right? You can't cryptographically prove unless you use some trusted hardware kind of stuff. But even then, are you really isolated? Are you really hardened? That sort of thing. So what this PR proposes to solve is precisely that. How can you self-attest? And this would involve a community of build platforms who can join and self-attest and say, look, I mean, we've audited our own cells. We basically guarantee, if you trust us, we're attesting that we're build level 3 or level 2 or whatnot. And similarly, the other idea is to have auditors do this for you. So third-party attestations to the same effect. But there's some differences here between the two approaches. Does anyone else want to add any more thoughts here about what I missed? Cool. And if not, I highly encourage everyone to take a look at it. There's been a very lively discussion here. I think it's a very interesting idea. And this is something that I think we should definitely solve. It'd be nice if we can get in a 1.0, if not 2.0. So I think it'll be very useful. I see something in the chat. Chris has said, of course, let's just assume everyone's not here is at OpenSSF Summit. So I think that's a safe assumption to make. Okay, so please take a look and comment. And I think that's it. Unless anyone else wants to discuss anything, we should be good to go.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Okay.
Next time will be Mark.
you.
So bye.
Thanks, Trashank. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you.